Welcome to our class. In this class, I will look at connecting to a database using PHP's MySQLi extension. The MySQL extension technically means MySQL improved. It is a relational database driver used with PHP to provide an interface with the MySQL database. The MySQLi extension only works with an SQL database. However, there are other ways that you can connect to a MySQL database. This is the old way. The old way is the MySQL extension. The new way is the MySQLi, which means improved. There are two versions of this. One is the object-oriented, which is being covered in this video. The other is the procedural. I am not covering the procedural. However, I do have examples in the sample code for you. The third way is with using the PHP data objects called PDO. This is also an object-oriented approach. This approach will be covered in another video. The advantage of using PDO over MySQLi is that the PDO driver can be used to access other databases. It is not limited to just MySQL database, which is the case with MySQLi. So the first thing you need to do when connecting to a database, there are generally 4 different pieces of information that are needed. First is the server, and in our case it is localhost. So you can either hard code in the name of the server, or to be more efficient, you can store it in a variable. You also need the username, and because I am using the super user, I am using the root. I am storing that in this variable. You also need a password. Here again, I am not using a password, so it will be stored here, which is essentially nothing. And you need the name of the database. Notice these are all literals. So using the MySQLi object, we're creating a new instance, passing it these 4 parameters. It needs the server name, the username, the password, and the database name. So you can use variables, as I have here, or you can just literally hard code them in. Now, and what we are doing, we are creating a new connection, and this is the object. Now, I am going to use an if-else here. You could use a try-catch. You always want to make sure that you have that connection before you work with it. So here I have the connection object, and I am executing the connect underscore error property. So this is the syntax here, and in traditional object-oriented programming, you would think object.property. PHP does not use a dot, it uses this operator. If there is a connection error, then we are going to call the die statement, meaning that after we execute this quotation inside it, the program will halt. I'm saying connection failed for this reason, and here I'm actually giving the connection error. And then here's my else. So this is for your testing. You don't have to echo back the else, you can use it for testing. Now, one thing I would like to point out, all of this is commonly referred to as a connection string. And it would be more efficient to store this in an external PHP file and to reference it as an include, because the chances are you're going to be repeating this on multiple pages, and it's more efficient to store it in one place. That way, if you change your user password or whatever, you only have to worry about changing it in one place. Okay, now, once we have the connection, we need to know what SQL statement are we going to be executing on a specific table or tables in this database. So here is our select statement. And if you remember, I kept on saying when we use PHP My Admin that when you use this with PHP, you get rid of those little tick marks. This is a string literal. It's a lot easier to work with this if you only need one set of quotations. So this is the SQL. I'm going to select the first name, the last name, the address, and the city from the members table. This SQL statement should sound familiar to you, and I'm storing it here in this variable. Now we need to execute or create the result set. So here again we have the connection object executing the query method on the SQL statement. And that's going to be return a result set. We will store it in this variable. Now that we have the result set, it's just a matter of how you want to display that on the page. In this file, I'm just showing you how you test first. Now, you also have the ability to test the number of records being returned. And here I have an echo statement, and I'm concatenating with an expression. $result. What is $result? That's my result set. Okay, $result, executing the number of rows property. That's the property of this object. All of these, the num underscore rows, the query function, our error number up here, here it is. These are all properties of this MySQL object. They're all either properties or methods of this MySQL object. And when we created a new instance of this object right here, and we stored it in this variable name here, it gives us the ability to execute these properties and methods on the object. So back to where we are. And here I have another if-else. So we want to make sure that we have some rows before we do anything else. Again, you could have used a try-catch here. So here, if $result, my result set, dot number of rows, is greater than 0. So if we do have some rows, we're going to loop through it using a while loop. If not, we're going to echo. And you could also, I just have an echo here for testing purposes. You could have a die statement here. Here's my while. All right, so while we have rows, that's essentially what this is saying. While $row, which is a variable that I created right now, equals $_result, that's my result set, and we're executing the fetch underscore assoc method. Okay, what this is doing, it's returning the key value pairs of the associative array, because that's essentially what these database tables are. Every row is an associative array. So as long as we have rows, and here's my echo statement, I'm putting everything inside a paragraph, I'm hard coding in a name, I'm concatenating it with $row. All right, this is my variable up here, which essentially is storing the associative array. And because it's storing the associative array, there's my brackets. All right, so bracket F name is going to return the value for the first name in that row or record. Concatenating it with a space, concatenating it again, $row, last name, here again, this is an array. It's an associative array. It's a key value pair. L name is the key. It's going to return a value from my record. Concatenating it with a literal address, and there's my address concatenated with city. You also can use the print underscore R PHP function for echoing back all the values. That's always an excellent way to test. If after we execute the SQL, we're going to close the connection. You don't want these connections open. Now we're going to close it. Here it's the close method. Here again, this is our connection object, and we're executing the close method on it. Now, let's take a look at the HTML. There's nothing here, so everything's going to be in the head section. This is just showing you. This is lining it up. So if I were to execute this in the browser, there we are. Remember, name was bold. There's the value being retrieved. Address was bold. Here is the address concatenated with the city. I have a break. Next line, next line, next line. There's 54 records. Now, if I looked at the source code, it would not look very professional because this is just testing. Now, supposing we wanted to actually display this in a web page, in a realistic situation. And remember, all of the PHP is going to be on top of the doc type, unless it needs to be embedded. This is where it belongs. At the very top of this page, we have our connections information. We need the server name, the username, the password, the database name. Here we're creating our connection, no different than we already have learned. Now we're checking the connection, making sure that we have it. Now here's the SQL statement. We're selecting those same 4 fields from members. Here we're setting up the results set. Now that's all we're doing in the head section. Now we're actually going to use that result set in the body to actually integrate the information from the database into the web page, which is essentially what a data-driven website does. So if we scroll down, all right, here's my normal HTML, there's my head, there's my style, there's my body, and notice the source code will look awful. I have another example identical to this where I have formatted the source code. There's several different ways of going about this. I have hard-coded some of my table tags here. You could have done all this with PHP should you have chosen that approach. And notice, because I'm hard coding it in, even if you're doing it with PHP, your column names can be whatever you want. They don't have to be identical to the field names. The field names are just for the database. You don't need to use them when it comes to the web page. Now, this is my first row. What I'm doing, I'm dynamically generating my inside rows. And now here, I'm closing my table. So in here, we have embedded PHP where I am dynamically generating the TR and the TD. So if every record is going to be inside a TR, the 4 different fields will be inside 4 different TDs. So here again, we have if the rows is greater than 0. Now, while we have rows, here's our result set, and we're fetching the data as an associative array, storing it in this variable, which is now an array, writing the TR element with PHP. I'm writing the TD element with PHP. Inside that TD, I'm concatenating this expression, which is the value being returned from this associative array with the key of fname. Now I'm concatenating that with my ending TD. This is a statement, there's a semicolon. The next line of code creates a TD for the last name field. I create a TD for the address. I create a TD, and there's my ending TR. So here's our while. Every time we loop through, which is 54 times, I open up the TR, code in the TDs, end the TR, end the while, end the if, end the else, close the connection, and now I'm ending my table. So if we were to look at this, there we go, everything is in the table. And here again, you can format that table using CSS however you want, and you want to make sure that the view source looks nice also.